All right, so it is past 7 o'clock. I'm late. I'm tardy. One demerit for me. I apologize to everybody, but I needed my
The wagging
wallet.
finger.
Or my, I know, yeah. Wave the finger at me. I apologize. It's all my fault. I'm a terrible person, and I'll be sorry when I'm burning in eternal hellfire. But until then, it's Monday, so we can learn to model stuff in Fusion 360. It's going to be a fun one. We got a new project that we're starting, beginner friendly. So we'll kind of start from scratch. We've got a couple of new people joining us here in class. Welcome. We've got new people joining us on the interweb. Welcome to you as well. And yeah, we'll just go ahead and jump right into it. So our project for the week, or for the next couple weeks, is going to be a Solargraphy camera, pinhole camera, designed for Solargraphy. I know what you're thinking. What the heck is that? I didn't know until last week when somebody proposed this as our project. Solargraphy is capturing the sun's path, and these images that you're looking at now are the sun's path from the winter solstice all the way to the summer solstice. So each one of these lines is a day or so of the sun's path across the sky, which I thought was super cool. So we're gonna make a camera, pinhole camera, that will allow us to capture images like this. Pinhole camera is a pretty basic instrument, but still fun nonetheless. We're gonna do so in Fusion 360 because that's how I roll. And today we're gonna start by modeling a can, which is kind of the center of our camera, is this aluminum can. I'm using this gigantic Arizona iced tea can because thanks to inflation, or in spite of inflation, these Arizona iced tea cans are still only 99 cents. So that's pretty cool. They should be like $1.50 or $18. I don't know with inflation, whatever that is, but still only 99 cents, which is great. So, with that said, I'm going to go ahead and start a new project. I've already done that here, so I'll let you kind of follow along with me. So we're in our projects, I don't know, bin over here on the side. And I went up and I clicked on the new project button here. And what that new project button will do is it'll make you, here, if I go ahead and pretend to do one, it'll make you a thing called new project, and you can go ahead and type letters there. Again, this is a pinhole camera or a solarography camera, whatever you want to name it so it makes sense in your brain hole. I support those choices. I named mine Solarography camera. And then if you double click on that thing that you just made, you will see nothingness. The blank slate, the tabla rusa. And in it we're going to
Carlo,
fill... What's that?
I was just gonna say, uh, is there some way I've got like it's showing everybody who's in dialing in online? Is there any way to make your window the predominant window?
Yeah, I think if you hover over the windows on
Yeah.
Google Meet, if you hover over it and you can hit there's a little pin icon, that will pin it so it's the main one.
And I don't. Oh, gotcha. There you go.
Cool?
Brilliant, thanks.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so um, I'm going to start a new document. I'm just going to close that little drawer over there. I'm going to start a new document just by hitting this little new design plus button up here at the top. Now we really have the blank slate. So, because we got a few brand new people here, I'll just kind of go over the drawing interface for everybody here. So, at the top right-hand corner, we've got a navigation cube. So as I hover my mouse over the kibbles and bits of this cube, the edges, the corners, and the faces, they highlight blue. Anything that highlights blue, I can click on it, and I spin around to look at just that side. Now, right now that's not very interesting because there's nothing going on, but if I have this document here that has three-dimensional items in it, you can see as I click on the top, I spin around, so I'm just looking straight down from the top. I can click on one of these little triangles there, and then I spin around to look at one side or another. I can also click and drag on this cube, and I move around in a little bit more granular method here. So again, because you don't have anything out in your drawing view, you don't see a whole lot going on, but you'll just have to trust me that that is indeed happening. On the top of our Fusion 360 window are all the tools that we're going to use to create things. In more specific, we're going to start with the Create menu, and we're going to do things like create sketches, and then use the items below the Create Sketch option in the Create menu to do things to those sketches, to make them three-dimensional or change them in some way, shape, or form. The Modify menu is where we'll modify those three-dimensional objects. And then probably we won't get much into assembly in this project, but you can also assemble joints and do all sorts of interesting, cool stuff. And if you want to know more about that, we've got some past classes recorded that you can check out, and we'll be doing stuff like that in the future for sure. As we start drawing, two things are going to happen. So the browser over here in our left side of our screen will start to populate with stuff. So let me bring up an example just again here. So as we start to create sketches, we'll have sketches folder that pops up, and in that sketches folder will be all of the two-dimensional sketches that made up our three-dimensional object that we're looking at right there. The other thing that will happen as we start drawing is at the very bottom of the screen, you will see we have absolutely nothing going on there. However, as we start drawing, that will begin to start filling up with icons. Fusion 360 is a parametric design software. So what that means is at any point, this is kind of like a timeline of events that happened from where I started my drawing all the way into where I currently am in the present. But at any point in time, I can go back in time and change something about one of these things, and then come back into the present, and that will all update. Is that making sense so far? Yeah? Yeah? I'm seeing head nodding, so that's a good thing. All right, so let's kind of jump in and start making a sketch, and that'll kind of help solidify some of these ideas, I think. As an organizational point, in general, most of the time in this class, we just start making sketches right off the bat. However, for this project, I want to have another level of organization, because we're going to have a can, and then we're going to have another piece, and then we're going to have possibly a jig to cut the top off. So for organizational purposes, we're going to start by creating a new component. A new component is a kind of a folder, you could say, that will hold all of the sketches and three-dimensional objects that we want to be associated with this one component. So I'm going to call this, I'm going to name this component my can component. And I'm going to go ahead and say OK. So we've got a can component here, and that can component is inside of our unsaved main document component here. something I just want to highlight is this little icon next to our can component, this little radio button. This is something you have to pay attention to as we start drawing. This is our active component button here. So as we create, like I mentioned, as we create sketches and create bodies, it's going to create folders, and where it creates those folders will be determined by that little radio button there. So if our can is our active component, as I create a sketch, it'll create that sketch inside of our can component. If my main document component was my active component, it would create that sketch out here in my main document and not inside of my can component. So just a point of organization and point of note to stay organized, because we like organization here. Organization is fun and it makes me smile. All right, let's go ahead and start by creating a sketch. And actually, before we create a sketch, the thing that I always forget to mention to new folks is my document settings. I have changed the units to freedom units. I tend to draw, think in freedom units or inches for those of you who don't refer to them like that. But if you want to change your active units from the default standard that literally everybody else in the world uses to freedom units, you can do so just by changing that active units and then setting it as your default if you like to do so. I'll be calling out inches as I bark out measurements at you guys, so that's a handy thing. All right, I'm going to go ahead and click on the Create menu here, and we'll scroll down to Create Sketch. One of the wonderful things about Fusion 360 is that almost everything has a tooltip. So if I just hover over any of the items here in the menu, it has a little tip that tells me both what the tool does and oftentimes how to use the tool. So I think it makes it really beginner friendly. If you're willing to do a little bit of reading before you use a tool, you can kind of get a good feel for what a tool does and even how to use it. So this sketch tool, for example, in that second paragraph says to select a construction plane and then create lines, arcs, or points. So I'll just go ahead and I'll click on that Create Sketch icon. I'm going to show a little bit more of a three-dimensional view here, so just so you can see. In order to create a two-dimensional sketch in our three-dimensional world, we have to have an imaginary piece of paper in order to make that sketch on. So we've got these three imaginary pieces of paper that Fusion gives us right off the bat. I'm going to go ahead and choose the one that is in between my blue and my green axis. That is my right side. And I'm going to go ahead and just click on that. Nope, I can come over and have it.
Okay, so I did the create sketch, and then I hit something on my cube, and now it looks like this.
You are in a sketch. You are editing a sketch. Good news. Yeah, so you've got your sketch palette open here, and you kind of spun around, so you're looking straight down at that sketch, right?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Sure.
And then, so something that happens, everything changes as soon as you click on your first surface. So all of our tools up at the top. We now have all these sketching tools here. And then we have a sketch palette open here. And that indicates that we're what's known as editing a sketch right now. Editing/creating. Yeah, oh, I still see a little confusion on the
I
template.
don't have a green line, I just have a red line.
Oh, you may just need to zoom out a little bit, or zoom in. It's just you're not try clicking on there's like a little home button there. There we go.
Okay.
And now if you click on the right, there we go.
Okay.
All right.
Home.
Yeah. So we just got a little lost in space, and we needed a helpful robot and a surly professor to get us back on track. And by a helpful robot, I mean this little home icon up here. So we were like, hey, what happened? Where are we? This doesn't look right. So if I just hit my home button, then it kind of takes me back to the origin, to my 0, 0, 0 point in the world. And now we're back on track. All right, so we are going to start by creating a rectangle. So if I click on create and then rectangle, there are a number of different kinds of rectangles that we can make here, just based on how you're able to measure your rectangle or locate it with other items that you may have already sketched, right? But we're just going to go ahead and choose this 2-point rectangle because it's an easy one to make. As a general rule of thumb, I like to have some part of my sketch connected to this origin here. So the point where your axes, axi intersect with each other. I like to have something connected to that just to keep things grounded. If you hit the home button, you can go back to that sketch point at any point, which is handy. So I'm going to click to place the first point of my rectangle, and now I'm going to move my mouse out. It's a click and move, not a click and drag. And now I can see some numbers here. And I encourage people to, once they see some numbers, to let go of your mouse and embrace the keyboard and type some numbers. So our height of our gigantic Arizona iced tea can is 7 inches. And to bounce back and forth between 2 or more measurements on a sketch tool, you can hit the tab key. So tab bounces me over to my other measurement, and that other measurement is, I brought my trusty calipers, it is 2.86. However, that is the diameter of our can, and we're actually drawing this as a sketch that we're going to revolve. So we actually want to divide that number by 2. We want to divide that number in half, and we can do math right here in the drawing window here. So if I want something to be exactly half as big as the dimension that I typed in, I can just type in 2.86 divided by 2, and that will give me half of that, obviously. And then I'm going to hit enter, and that will finish that rectangle.
I clicked before entering in the numbers, and now I don't know how to modify.
We got random clickers. No.
Apologies. So as we're going back, could I just caught up getting installed here?
Sure.
I've got my view, I've got my component, I've got my sketch, and I missed the part where you drew the rectangle.
Yeah. So in the create menu, there is a you created a sketch.
I did.
Cool. Then there's the 2-point rectangle option, and you can choose that, and you can click to place the first point of your rectangle, and I like to have it connected to the origin, and then you move your mouse out, and then you can type in numbers. So like our height was 7 inches tall, and then tab will bounce you over to the other measurement.
Okay, I guess my UI was a little different.
How did you do that?
Sorry. Alright, so
Yeah, so-
create a component can.
So you want to cancel that extrude,
Alright.
and you want to say create, and then create sketch.
Okay, yeah, but I did
There
that.
you go, and then you'll click on one of those planes, and there you go.
Okay.
There we go, so now we got all of our sketch
Alright,
tools
now it
there.
looks like yours. Got it.
There you go.
2-point rectangle.
Do the 2-point rectangle option. And now, let's say you forgot to type measurement in. I mean, I've never forgot to type in a measurement. But Mike, have you ever forgot to type in a measurement? No, I don't believe it. So you can always dimension things after the fact. So I've got one measurement, and I think that's what you've got as well. You've got like a height and not a width. Is that right?
Let's see, 0.05 and little razor blades.
Click cancel and that delete thing there. And if you looks like maybe we don't have 2 dimensions. That's okay. So if you clicked and don't have any dimensions, like I've got right now, we can add them after the fact. So here, let me make this the wrong shape, and then we can see some change. So in the create menu, if you come all the way to the bottom, there is a sketch dimension option. And if we choose that tool, and then if I click on like this, one of these lines that I want to give a dimension to, I just click one time, and now move my mouse out. Now I'm kind of placing this dimension wherever I want it to live. So I'm just going to place it right there. And right now mine says 5.623001. We can just type in the measurement that we want it to be. So 7 inches, and then hit enter. And then we can do that same thing again. Grab our sketch dimension tool. We can click on that bottom dimension, place that wherever we want to place it, and then it was 2.85? 2.86. 2.86 divided by 2. Divided by 2. And then hit enter. There we go. How are we doing at home? We got a rectangle at home? Sweet.
Yep.
Best rectangle ever. All right.
How do I just move my screen so that home button, can I like bring it to the center of my screen? It's like hiding behind all these little windows now.
Well, so you can move the windows out of the way.
No, but now they're like offset.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So yeah. So if we want, we can kind of move our view around. A lot of times the way that I move my view is I zoom out and then zoom back in. So if my thing is kind of way over to my drawing is way over to the side, I'll zoom out and then I'll zoom in. I find myself doing that quite often, mostly because that method doesn't involve me getting a tool. There is also a tool down here in the bottom. So there's a pan tool, and that'll let me shift my drawing left to right. And then when I'm done using that pan tool, before I can do anything else, I have to hit the escape key to kind of put that tool away. So that's a lot of steps for me. I'm lazy, so I just end up like zooming in and zooming out. But I'm not here to judge. I'm here to teach people how to use Fusion 360. All right, we've got our can drawn, or our start of our can drawn. But I'd like to get a little bit more detailed with our can, and let's draw the bottom of it. So the bottom of our can, if we zoom in to the bottom, we can start by figuring out how high this dome is here. So the center of this dome, I know from my previous measurement, is 0.4 inches. So I'm going to grab my line tool. So I'm going to say create, and then line, and then I'm going to draw a line right from my origin here, from kind of that center point corner of the can. And I'm going to click to place the beginning of my line, and I'm going to move my mouse up. And now instead of clicking again, I'm going to type in that measurement of 0.4 inches. And now that I've got that measurement typed in, I'm going to go ahead and click enter. And you can see that placed a point up there. This is kind of the middle point, the lowest point of this little dome on our can here. The next measurement that we want is we want to do another line. So I'm going to go ahead and grab from my create menu. I'm going to go ahead and grab the line tool again. I'm going to place my line somewhere. I'm going to place it, make another vertical line. I'm going to place it just somewhere on the bottom of this line. However, key thing to point out is we do not want to place it right at the center of this line. So that little blue triangle that's popping up there is telling me, hey, you're snapping to the midpoint of that line. We specifically want to make sure we do not click on the midpoint of that line. So anywhere, literally anywhere else on that line will be fine. And I'm going to draw that line straight up. And that line is going to go a height of 0.165, since we're being precise. And then I'm going to go ahead and click enter. Alright, so now I want to really hone in and specify a dimension between those two lines that I just made. And for, like, I wish I had like Skittles or something to throw out, because you totally asked a question that leads me to this next point. Remember we added a dimension to a line? Anybody want to guess how we can add a dimension between two lines? Boom. So just the way we added a sketch dimension to a line itself, you can add a sketch dimension between two lines or between two objects. So let's go ahead and do that now. From the create menu, if I choose that sketch dimension option, and I'll pick the first line that I made, and then I'll pick the second line that I made, and now I can move my mouse in between those, and I can place that dimension just like I was doing before. And that dimension is something I'm gonna tell you. It's not a secret. It is, look at that, 2 inches. I feel like maybe that, apparently the Arizona iced tea people, they use freedom units in Arizona. Who knew?
Yeah.
Oh.
Shouldn't that be 2 inches over 2?
It should be 2 inches over 2. That is a good call. So you could type in 2 inches divided by 2. I don't know if you can do this math in your head, but I'm pretty good. I can do this math in my head, so you could also type in 1 inch if you'd like. I won't stop you. Did you have a question? Sorry.
No, I got it.
Okay, cool. All right, so now let's do some connecting of those dots. So between those dots, we're going to have a nice curve. So this is kind of the curve that is the underside of our can. It's like a concave part there. And I'm going to create that curve if I click on my create menu and come down to arc and then over to 3-point arc. Now, the way you use the 3-point arc tool, if I just stop moving my mouse, it says, hey, place the start point. So I will click on the end point of one of my lines here, either this line or this line. I know I'm clicking on the end point because I get a little blue square that surrounds my cursor, so that's telling me I'm clicking on that end point as my start point. And now I'm going to move my mouse out, and if I stop moving my mouse again, it says place the endpoint. So I'm going to click the other end of the other line and click my endpoint. And now if I move my mouse in between those objects, now I get a little curve that I'm making here. I'm going to purposefully do this poorly because we're gonna force it into compliance in the next step here. So I'll go ahead and I want my line to look more like this, but I'm gonna make it look really off. And you can do the same if you like. Now, the next thing I want to do here is I'd like to force this into kind of compliance. So what I need to do is I need to have this arc be tangent to a line that would go straight horizontally from here out. And that way I'll have a nice dome as opposed to a heart shape. So let's go ahead and draw a line right now, just to illustrate that, to have a line that goes from the end point straight out here. And something you'll notice is I got a little blue square in between those two lines. That is telling me that those lines are perpendicular to each other. So that straight up and down vertical line is going to be directly perpendicular to that horizontal line that we're drawing right now. That is what is known as a constraint. And if I click and just kind of place that line there, you can see that constraint icon is just kind of hanging out there. So that is our 90-degree or perpendicular constraint. And if we look closer now at our sketch, we can see we've got a whole bunch of other of those icons hanging out. So there's a one here that says that this line is perpendicular to this line. I'm not sure what that icon is telling me. It might be referring to over here.
I don't know one of those.
Uh-oh. Well, that's okay, because we're about to add constraints. Up in the top, there's a whole menu full of constraints. So if you don't have a constraint, like for example, is it this one that's missing?
No, I'm missing that one way on the bottom.
This one down here?
Nope. That guy.
Ah, it's the same thing. Okay, cool. So now there's no way for me to guarantee that this line is perpendicular to this line. I can add a constraint after the fact though, so I can add this perpendicular constraint from my constraints menu. And the way that I do that is I just click on the first line and then the line I want it to be perpendicular to. And it tells me that it's over constrained for some reason. I don't know how that can be over constrained because there's no constraints on it, but in theory you're able to place a constraint, and if it tells you that it's over constrained, then it already exists somehow. But we do want to add a constraint that will make our arc tangent to this little line that we made here. So from our constraints menu, we can choose the tangent option. Something that's kind of important to note here is whenever I select an item, like, hey, I want to make a tangent thing, or hey, I want to extrude something, I try to not have anything selected. So right now my little tiny line there is selected, and if I choose tangent, it's already got one thing selected, so, and it may or may not be the item that I actually want to make tangent to something. So I make it a point of, if I've got something selected, I click off into no man's land over here, just so we don't have anything selected. So now when I go ahead and choose this tangent option, now I can be sure that I'm picking the correct two items. So that line and that arc, and now we've got a nice little tangent seeds created between those things. The other thing that you will notice that just happened is my arc changed from blue to black. Black lines mean that things are fully constrained. So I always like to see a lot of black lines going on in my drawing. It ensures me that everything is kind of locked in place and isn't going to change in weird ways if I make modifications.
Is it just blue if it's not black then?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Technically there are also purple lines, but you know that's for another day. All right, cool. So let's make the outside lip of our can here.
How did you just move that measurement over there?
Oh, that's a good question. So if you've got measurements that are, sometimes your measurements kind of end up like that, end up kind of a jumble. And I like to keep things so they're a little bit more easy to read. So you can just click and drag on any of those measurements there, and you can move them into a place that makes more sense. And it's a little bit easier to read. Good question, thank you.
And that's just hitting the escape key to get off of whatever.
Yeah, if you happen to have a tool in your hand, like you got the tangent tool, you can hit the escape key and kind of put that away.
Are there shortcuts for all these things?
There are shortcuts for some things, and
Or
if
like to go back to the
you,
one that you were just using?
yeah, well, you know what? Maybe if I right-click, repeat tangent. I don't know if there's a repeat tool shortcut. However, like in the create menu here, we can see there's a little letter L next to the line tool. So that is the keyboard shortcut for that. Anything that does not have a keyboard shortcut, like for example, this tangent constraint does not have a keyboard shortcut. However, if I hover over the little, the next to it, I get those little 3 dots. If I click on those 3 dots, I can do one of 2 things. So I can either pin it to the toolbar, which is all my icons up here at the top. That's my toolbar. Or I can pin to change keyboard shortcut. And then like I could, so now I can push like Control T.
Okay.
And now if I say OK, you can see here Control T is now my tangent keyboard shortcut. So when you're having a dinner party and you want to impress all your friends with the keyboard shortcuts, you know, in CAD, you know, it's what the kids do now, right? Yeah. All right. So to place the last little bit of our can, I'm going to go ahead and draw one more rectangle. So I'm going to go ahead and, from my create menu, I'll grab rectangle and then 2-point rectangle. I'm going to click and place this rectangle at the bottom, like outside edge of my can, I guess we're saying here. This is going to be the same height as our little point here, so it's going to be 0.165, and then I'll hit the tab key, and we're just kind of spitballing here. This is roughly,
So you just hit the tab to go from whatever dimension.
yeah, to bounce from, you know, either your horizontal dimension to your vertical dimension, or your vertical dimension to your horizontal dimension. And our horizontally, this is going to be 0.25. Sometimes those things seem too good to be true, but, you know, America. That's how you know this iced tea was made in Arizona. It's got unit measurements that make sense and freedom units. And I'm going to go ahead and click enter. So again, here I got like measurements on top of each other, so I'll just kind of separate those a little bit. All right, so now we're all done making this sketch. So I'm going to go ahead and say finish sketch. Oh wait, what happened to my, oh, it's just kind of hiding. All right, cool. Now we can make a thing three-dimensional. That'll be fun.
What are we doing? Did we draw half of a can?
We drew half of a can. Yeah. So I thought it would be an interesting exercise. Usually, the first time around, we use the extrude tool a whole lot. But there's a whole other tool here called the Revolve Tool, and it's a useful thing for making a complex shape, kind of like a can that we have right here that is kind of one profile rotated around a center point. So from the Create menu, actually, before we do that, we've got a Sketches folder here now. If I spin down the little triangle next to my Sketches folder, we can see we've got a sketch called Sketch 1. I always encourage people to be better than me and name your sketches. I'm much better at this now than when I first started. This is our can profile. You can easily get to a place where you've got 13 or 14 sketches.
How do I do that?
So to rename it, you click one time and pause, and then click a second time.
Do I do a create selection set?
No, you may be right-clicking and stuff.
I don't have anything under sketch. Oh, wait, there
Yeah? No, okay, cool. You're good, you're good. Yeah, so can profile is what I called mine. Anything is better than Sketch 1. Literally anything. And now that we've got that done, let's go ahead and make this three-dimensional. So from our Create menu, if I go ahead and choose the Revolve option, and I pick as the profile that I'm going to revolve that shape there. And now under the axis section of my revolve window, if I click on that little select button, now I can pick the axis that I'm revolving around, and that for us it's going to be this axis that was the center of our origin. It's kind of like this inside left edge. It's going to go ahead and spin that can around. Something to note here is we're spinning this around 360 degrees because, well, that's what a can looks like. But you could not do that if you wanted to. If you wanted to just make half a can, we could spin this around an angle of 180 degrees, and you just have half a can. But half a can would not be a very good pinhole camera, so we're gonna spin it around 360 degrees. And I'm gonna say oakley dokley. So now we've got a.
And you made a new body from that.
It did, yeah. It made a brand new body. So we've got a bodies folder here now, and if I spin open that bodies folder, we've got a body that if I click one time and then pause and click a second time, I can call it a can.
Okay, it's cool.
So let's do some kind of finishing touches here. So the bottom of our can is super angular. That's not what a can looks like. So we can add some curvy bits to our can, and I'm just going to do that with an item from the Modify menu. I can choose this fillet option, and a fillet is basically a way to make a hard 90-degree edge and turn it into a nice curvy bit. So if I use my fillet tool here, and I'm just going to click on this outside edge of my can. I'm kind of working from outside in here. So now I've got this little blue arrow, and I can drag that in a little bit till I got something that I think looks good.
Sorry, what were those steps again?
So
Create fillet?
Yeah, so modify and then fillet. And now I can just click on this edge here, and I've got this blue triangle, and I can drag that in a little bit. Something like that, and I'll go ahead and click OK. And I'm going to do that a bunch of times. So I'm going to click on modify and then fillet again. And now I'm going to look at this edge here in between. That's kind of like my inner edge there. And I can drag this out a little bit. Alright. Actually, that probably goes out quite a bit. And I'm going to go ahead and say OK. And I'm just going to kind of keep working from the outside to the inside. So I'll click on modify again. I'll go ahead and grab my fillet command. I'll click on this edge that's kind of like the foot of my can. Curve that in a little bit. I'll say OK. If we wanted to, we could do some of these fillets at the same time. So these last two I'll do like that just to show you how that would work. So this edge here, if I just drag this in a little bit, you can see in my fillet window I've got one edge here. If I hit the plus button, now it'll let me pick a second edge and add a fillet of a different amount to that second edge. So you can click on those fillets and do more of them at once. What best practice is here maybe is up for debate. I will say that I don't do that very often, and that being because you can see down here in our timeline we've got a whole bunch of things that have been happening. So here we made our sketch, here we revolved our sketch, and you can see as I click on these icons, the various fillets highlight. So it's easy for me to go, oh hey, this is the fillet that I wanted to change. I can click on that, and here I guess they all highlight, so maybe it's alright. It's a moot point. I mean, use dealer's choice. That's what I say. So now we've got our can shape here. At any point now, because Fusion 360 is a parametric design software, I could change something about my can. Let's say you go to the store and they don't have any Arizona iced tea. All they have is Red Bull cans. Big giant Red Bull cans. So if you wanted to, we could right click on this sketch that we made when we first started going down this adventure here. And here, let me zoom out to show you. I've got a big tall Arizona iced tea can. If I right click on that sketch and say edit sketch, now I've gone back in time to when I was first making that sketch, and I could say double click on that 7-inch and say, oh, this Red Bull can, that's only 5 inches. And it's a different measurement down here. It's 2 inches, not 2.86 inches.
How do you do the edit thing like that? To edit the measurement?
Yeah, so down here in the timeline, if we right click on the item in the timeline and choose edit sketch, or secondarily your sketch in your sketches folder in your browser, you can right click on that and say edit sketch. And you'll notice all the things down here in our timeline kind of gray themselves out. So now we've gone back in time to when we're like, those things are like Marty McFly's sister's hand in the photo. Like, you know, you're changing things about the past, and maybe your sister doesn't exist right now, so she's got a ghosted out hand. And we can change things about this sketch. So I could, like I said, modify the height. Let's make it.
How do you do that?
Oh,
Do
I
that
could
right
just
there.
double click
Double
on
click?
that. Yeah, double
Okay.
click on any measurement,
Okay.
and then you can make an adjustment to it. So I can make it 4-inch. And now when I say click on the Finish Sketch button, now when we come back into the present, now we're back in 1985, and our sister's hand is, you know, not a ghosted image anymore, and we got a brand new truck sitting in the garage. And not that old busted stuff, it's a sweet black new truck. All right, so that's it. So that's our can. I'm going to change mine back to my nice big 7-inch tall Arizona iced tea can. We've got 5 minutes left.
Carl,
Yeah.
how much did you fill at that absolute bottom little lip?
Which
16?
which one? Like this one
No,
down
not
here?
the outside. That one I think you did 0.15.
Ah.
The little one in the middle.
Just this guy in the inside here.
Not really the one on the bottom.
Like the bottom edge, like that.
Yeah.
That one is. I made it 0.1.
Okay.
But it's kind of subjective. The key measurement that we really need, Mike, is the diameter of our can.
Yeah.
Everything else down here at the bottom is just for show. And speaking of for show, I learned a new trick before class, and maybe I'll share that with you guys. So we've got an iced tea can here, and I wanted to make it look like an iced tea can. And by that I mean have like a nice label on the outside of it. You can do that in Fusion. I went out to the internet and I Googled Arizona iced tea can unwrapped, and I found an image of an Arizona iced tea can just like the decal on the outside. So from the insert menu, if you go out and you find an image, any image will do, I can choose this decal option. And this is just kind of a fun thing here. Now I've got my insert window. When I choose that decal option, I'm gonna insert from my computer. And then I'm going to find my little Arizona iced tea, or whatever image you found. And now I can just click on the face that I want to put that on. And this is kind of fun. Now I can just kind of expand it with this little gizmo down here.
What was it under insert?
Under insert decal. Yeah. And then when you insert decal, you'll insert from your computer, which is the little bottom left-hand corner button, and then you'll find your image wherever in space-time that may exist. Now we've got our little decal window here, and the last thing I have to do is select the face that I want to put that on. So I'm going to pick that face, and I think I actually have to rotate this 90. Maybe it's the right way. Maybe it is this way. If I just expand that out, move it into place, and expand it out, and spin around, and it's not quite mean in the back, but you know, like we're halfway there. In fact, I do think that this needs to be rotated. I think it's supposed to go that way. That looks better. And we're not mean to the back, but it's all just for fun anyway. So I'm just going to say OK here. And there we go. Now we got an Arizona iced tea can that kind of looks like an Arizona iced tea can.
What was your Google search to find the image, Carl?
I Googled Arizona iced tea can unwrapped. And then I just look at images, and like for me it was the second one.
Got it.
Sure enough.
Yeah.
And how did you place it on?
And then placing it on there, edit feature. So I've got this little, these arrows here, so these let me kind of adjust it up and down. I can also scale it. So there's this little corner icon, and this lets me enlarge or shrink it down uniformly. I can also enlarge it or shrink it ununiformly, so I can kind of squish it or stretch it in just one direction or the other, or kind of make it taller or shorter in kind of just one axis.
What channels did you use to stretch it?
So these icons, or these little handles here,
Oh, I see.
clicking and dragging on those let me kind of stretch it in and out. You can also, there is a scale X and Y over here in our edit feature, or I guess it would be the decal window. And you could just type in a number there if you want to try experimenting with, like, 2 times as big or 2.4 or whatever. All right, cool. So that brings us to the end of the first part of our pinhole camera solargraphy adventure. Anybody have any questions before we wrap up? Questions at home? How'd you guys do?
All good. Thanks, Carl.
Good. And we're good here in class? All right, perfect. So we will see you guys next week. Next week, we will continue making our pinhole camera by making this this top here. So, online I found people who were doing this with like tape and another part of a can, but I thought it would be fun. Oh, and it's 8 o'clock now, so now my computer is thinking I'm going to bed. There we go. All right, so if I turn off the outside, I thought it would be fun to do a threaded top and bottom. So those are threads that we'll make, and then here's so you'll be able to screw it tight, put your film in there, screw it tight, and then set it up somewhere, and we'll even have embossed text on the outside. So, because you got to leave this thing sitting for like many days to make a nice solargraphy picture. So we're gonna write "Don't touch" and tell people what the hell this crap is that's hanging out somewhere in the world. All right, cool. We'll see you next week.
When you see this, it's going to be saved in the